Hello and welcome to this special edition of Global Insights on China's Economy, a series of high-end interviews with movers and shakers, economists and industry watchers. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Greetings. Our guest today is Grzegorz Kołodko, former Deputy Prime Minister of Poland and Professor of Economics at Kosminski University in Warsaw, sharing his insights on the Chinese economy and how it could drive economic globalization further.
Grzegorz Kołodko was Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance from 1994 to 1997 and from 2002 to 2003. He is now a distinguished professor of economics and a consultant for various international organizations. His numerous award-winning academic books include Will China Save the World?, Chinism and New Pragmatism, and Truth, Errors, and Lies, Politics and Economics in a Volatile World, made him the most quoted Polish economist. Kołodko has demonstrated genuine interest in China's development path, writing articles and bestsellers on China. He once described China's development over the past 4 decades as the greatest economic success story in the history of mankind.
There have been concerns about the Chinese economy. If you look at the GDP figure for the first 3 quarters, the overall annual target of the Chinese government is for the economy to grow 5%. How do you assess the performance of the Chinese economy for the first 3 quarters?
Being an economist, I'm very much aware of the challenges you are facing in China, but I do know also that China's authorities are very much aware of these challenges, together with the business leadership and the policy response, the management response, the governance response is an adequate one. What was recently taking place in China, what was recently decided by the government to lose a little bit monetary policy, to encourage supply, to raise the consumption of the household sector, it's the right direction of the adjustment. My second point is, I'm not that much, concerned that China is growing only 5% this year, because it will be close to 5% if we stay with the GDP comparison with the last year. Still, 5% GDP growth is about twice as high as the world average. 5% is much more than we have the growth in the European Union. And in some countries, there is not growth at all. For instance, in Germany, the biggest economy of the European continent, there is already second-year recession. The output is going down a little bit, maybe this year by 0.2%. In the United States, there is a robust economic growth, but it is still much less than 5%. So again, depends how we compare. If we compare this year growth in China, measured by GDP, with what you were able to accomplish, say, 10, 20 years ago, it is much slower, but it is still firmly above the world average. So China is catching up, but at the slower race, because it's already at the higher level.
For decades, globalization has connected us like never before, but this interconnectedness isn't evenly distributed. With globalization facing a backlash and neoliberalism running out of steam, the world is increasingly turning to China to tackle pressing issues and look for answers to new challenges. Committed to facilitating open markets, China saw its economy grow by 5.2% in 2023, surpassing the government's target. The momentum has continued in 2024, with the GDP increasing by 4.8% year-on-year in the first 9 months. Substantial investments in research and development, particularly in technology-intensive sectors, have positioned China as a leader in innovation and advanced manufacturing, supporting its competitive edge in global supply chains. A series of major initiatives it has taken are infusing new energy into economic globalization. The Belt and Road Initiative aims to connect the country with Europe, Africa, and the rest of Asia, potentially boosting economic growth for participating nations. Currently, China has to deal with a new period of globalization, which involves greater protectionism. how to spur cooperation in a fragmented world has become a much more urgent question under the current geopolitical landscape.
With the intensifying great power rivalry, there comes fragmentation of the world economy, supply chains, friendshoring, nearshoring, so on and so forth. Do you still believe in what you once called the irreversible globalization? I think you mentioned that term in your book, New Pragmatism.
Yes, one of my book, Political Economy of New Pragmatism, has a subtitle, Economics and Politics of Irreversible. Globalization is irreversible. I mean economic globalization because of interrelations between businesses all over the world and because it is a good factor for development. But there are the turbulence. There is less maturity of this globalization, especially after the previous Trump administration, if there will be the next one. So globalization does continue, but at the same time we have new nationalism, we have protectionism, we have the trade war, we have tariffs, etc., which is hardly advised by sensible economics. It is rather driven by the political reasoning, which I think is ill-advised. You know, I wish that policy will be also more knowledge-based. Pretty often we are hearing saying knowledge-based economy. I would like to have more knowledge-based policy, but policy is not knowledge-based, policy is emotion-based. Definitely China's policy is much more knowledge-based than American policy.
Yeah, well-informed policies.
In China we have a different political system than, say, in the West, but this system is being supported by meritocracy. The people which know that 2 times 2 is 4 are taking the decisions. But sometimes, you know, in the West, starting from the United States, it seems, you know, like the people which are making decisions, they still believe that this is 2 times 2, 5 or 3, or depends, are you selling or buying? So the policy driven by emotions is not a good advice for economic rationality. There is less of rationality in the global economy, what is not implying that this is the end of globalization. Now, what you have raised, it is maybe the most interesting viewpoint from geopolitical changes. I remember the book published a dozen or so years ago, which was called The West and the Rest. So there was the West with the hegemon position of the United States, and then there was the rest, including most of the people of the world, starting with, at that time, still the most populous country of the world, rising China. Now I hear much more a concept of so-called global South. And within the global South, China aspires to be the leader of global South, but somebody else too. India would like to be also more influential within so-called global South, whatever global South implies. So maybe I will write a book or a short essay, which will be this time called Global South and the Rest. So now Global South is relatively more and more important because Global South is more than 40% of the global output, if not more. It is more than 80% of the world population of over 8 billion of us, and China is a leading force of the global South, what we see at the fora like BRICS summit in Kazan, city of Russia, what we see also on the United Nations fora and elsewhere. And it is hardly acceptable by the United States, European Union, British, German, French, Italian, Polish position is somehow different. It is hardly acceptable by the United States that they are losing their hegemonic position. They are afraid that if they will lose it, because they will not be a hegemon of the world, I mean the United States anymore. This position will be taken by China. Do not make mistake. China neither wish or is able to be the hegemon of the world. But China is working to the end of multipolar world. So we have this political or geopolitical game which is making a significant impact on economic competitiveness or on trade, flow of capital, portfolio, direct investment. And for that reason, politics is being driven by an economic reasoning. There is not economic justification for 100% import duties for China-made electric cars, for forbidding investment by Huawei in 5G internet network in a country like Poland or Italy or whatever. It is driven by rationality of politics, if it is rationality, because I see the political behavior of some countries, mostly in the West rather than in the global South, rather irrational than rational. So we will have plenty of problems because of interaction between politics and economics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.